So what I'd like to, first of all, do is thank you for all of you showing up. It's always helpful to see a group of people who have a mindset to learn and to really be part of, I think, really the paradigm shift in our industry. I think Ray's done a great job to really make that a major point. And I think that, for that sake, I think we wanted to really bring to you a session that kind of gave you some tools to take with you and really decide, well, how do we really bridge this gap? After all this discussion about cyber, it's important to really formulate a strategy, right? Formulate a direction in regards to your assessments. I think that some of you already do that. I know some people in the room that have been doing that for a period of years and have been doing it fairly well. But again, it's a process, right? So adding cyber to a security risk assessment is the title. Wanted to introduce two panelists, which, I think that sometimes you meet people over the years and you know that they definitely know more than you and what they do, for sure. And also, they have the right mindset. I think that all of us in this transition have to realize that we're all going to learn things from ourselves, from each other. And we're also going to learn a lot of things from what is being developed in the marketplace, but we have to be open to it. So Sam Trotman and, of course, Tom, and I think most people know Tom already. I wanted both of you to kind of introduce yourselves, if you could, to the audience. It would be fantastic. Again.
So, as Pierre said, my name is Samuel Trotman. I have about 12 years of experience in security system design and technology integration. My current role, I serve as the Director of Integrated Technology for an engineering and consulting firm by the name of KLJ. My group basically implements solutions, technology solutions across various markets, surface transportation, airports, seaports, municipal groups, and we have an emphasis, our focus as well, looking at smart cities initiatives.
I'm Thomas Norman. I'm with Ingram Micro. I'm Ingram's global cybersecurity consultant. I'm an old guy, so I've been in the business since before electricity. And about 35 plus years as an independent security and anti-terrorism consultant. About 20 of those years working at an office and a home out of Beirut, Lebanon. And occasionally coming back to the U.S. to work as a subject matter expert with various firms here in the U.S. Also had the opportunity to write about 11 books and research papers on security. One of those won Security Industry Book of the Year last year, and that was on risk analysis.
And my name is Pierre Bourgeix. I've been in the industry for close to 17 years. Started out in the barrier industry. Went into integration, worked with the gate control industry, worked in the Middle East on projects that I think combined by a lot of people would remember Saudi Aramco, Saudi project, a lot of different things in Kuwait and Iraq. But then coming back, I decided, based on certain events, and then we'll talk about that a little bit in terms of experiences, realized that IT security is going to be a huge problem in the world. And I decided to get into IT security and have been in cybersecurity for the last 3.5, 4 years. And then finally decided to move forward because of really my passion to really converge this industry. And Ray and I and everyone else that's involved in it, it really becomes a passion to try to get the clients as well as getting the industry on the right path. So that's what that's all about. So what is this all about? Convergent assessments, IT, OT, physical security. Obviously information technology, operational technology, and physical security. We talked about it, we've discussed it. These are things that are critical. The evolution for a converged approach to assessment. That's what we're going to be looking at today. IT perspectives on assessing security needs in a physical world, in the physical world. Building a foundation for success and building a proper design that is acceptable to stakeholders and IT. Of course, that's probably the biggest one, and that's going to be a critical part of this. Then unifying IT and physical security, and then the questions to unlock a converged assessment. So what we're going to do today is we're going to give you kind of, my convergent assessment approach in terms of how I do things, but also how we have evolved in terms of the type of questions we ask when we do assessments. And I think that that's going to be part of the puzzle as we move along. And I think that we're also, in fact, going to give you a rating system that may be able to be used when you're doing these assessments. And then, by the way, questions-wise, we're going to get to the question side, and that's when the banter and the discussions can come to bear, because I think sometimes we get into these questions before we've really matured the conversation. So today's reality versus tomorrow's expectation. So this is all facing all of us today. We're dealing with a world that's in chaos from the standpoint of our industry. We have a lot of things going on. We have integrators doing their thing. We've got manufacturers kind of not wanting to do their thing. And then we've got consultants not very sure what they want to do. Or they do, but they're really stuck between a rock and a hard place based upon their client base. So, where are we at? Okay, it's a product-driven solution. So many times it's the product that defines the solution, which unfortunately is kind of the wrong way to do it, but the reality is sometimes we're stuck doing it. So we've got it, the manufacturer, we have to bring them in, we have to define kind of what we're dealing with, and then pretty much build a solution around it. So the second, low visibility to business needs and applications. So the problem is that we're really not asking questions that are leading us to the right business problems that are really going to help the client in regards to security. Because as we find, security is no longer really the issue, it's the business issue as a whole. It's the risk, it's the liability. This is where all of them are coming from in regards to their issues. And this is usually what's driving the, if we talk about the security director, well, why is he being told to do this? That's the question you have to ask. It's not the question of he's doing it. It's the question is, why is he doing it? And so we have to really bridge that and get to a higher level sometimes, and we'll kind of explain how to do that. I know it's not as simple as 1, 2, 3. IT is last at the table. Segmentation, compliance, and storage are not even a discussion sometimes, right? So we get into a system, we start building a system, we start creating the evolution of a solution, but we bring IT sometimes last at the table. And sometimes the IT guy is going, well, this is not going to happen. We don't have, and this still goes on. Even though we want this to be a mature world, it's still not there. So integrated preference. Well, I think each one of you are dealing with this issue. The integrator becomes the person who's driving the solution because they don't have the competencies to put in the right systems that really is what the client's expecting. Then we have to make what? We have to really say, okay, I know we can't do this, so what can you do, because this is the only thing you can install. So we have to look at that as a problem, and that is a problem that we have to, and that's education and training, but we've been talking about that for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, this is still an issue. So one-dimensional solutions, multi-dimensional solutions are required in a business environment to define how you solve business issues and security issues. They are a combined effect. You can't have a one-dimensional solution because, unfortunately, that client, even though you think you're giving them a solution, it's only taking control of one aspect. Reactionary decision making. Of course, we talked about that in previous sessions. We make decisions on reaction. We don't base on looking at the forward thinking of what the business is doing. Why are they doing this? How are they doing this? How do we bring in those decision makers, and that's how we're going to solve some of that, but that's next. The low-level expectations by low-level decision makers. So again, the biggest issue is these things are critical because you have to be aware, okay, so this is where we are. This is current state. This is the current state of the world we're in. And all of us deal with certain sets of these things. How do we resolve that? And that's what we're going to discuss. So path today's ITPS was security assessment. So Tom he wrote a great report, and so I took a couple of his points because I thought it was critical in the conversation. So we took kind of this, and I added a few things to it, but this is in the report, and this is critical. You can get the report, it's on, and this also, the slide deck will be available for you guys as well, so I think this will be helpful. But, so get a C-level commitment to security. Now, again, everybody says that. We're going to explain how to do it. So don't, please, I know it's hard. Yeah, we're not going to throw a question on that. I'm going to explain that. Know your legal obligation for data protection. And everybody needs to understand what data really is and what that means in regards to protection. We've had conversations that we've talked, about this, but I want to really delve into that a little bit so that you understand what that means in regards to storage. Define your risk. What is the acceptable level of risk? So, risk. And this is going to be a critical thing. I want all of you to really think about what that means to you. Unfortunately, when we do risk assessments, we try to base assessments based upon compliance, regulatory bodies, defining based upon security, IT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But risk is different for everyone. And the acceptable level of risk is also different for every business. So we can't assume that they're willing, first of all, if they don't know what they don't know, then they don't know they're at risk. So the key is to really have a roadmap to really identify what risks there are. But you can't do that unless you have everybody at the table so that you can get to that risk, right? So if it's just one person, that one person only understands one segment of that risk. So we'll explain that as well. And I know it's a lot, but trust me, in the conversation, the questions, it unlocks a lot of this. So perform a converged gap assessment. So I say that, perform a converged gap assessment. IT, OT, physical security, and also the different environments that people use security. So from video to access control, it's not just dealing with one segment of the business. So when you do a converged gap assessment, for me, I need to address the IT environment, the operational technology environment, the physical security environment, and honestly, the IoT environment. Now, that can be done by addressing what they do within those areas. Taking a look at the network architectural design plan, looking at what they do in the operational technology or the SCADA controls. What do they do in terms of business operations? Are they using, different types of systems, radio, et cetera? It doesn't matter. We would want to know that because I want to know what the roadmap is. How do I know? I don't know anything until I know. So the key is you have to ask those type of questions. And again, questions lead to people sitting at the table because not one person is going to know all those answers. So, IT security implementation plan, we want to know what their implementation plan in regards to security. Why? Because IT security implementation plans in regards to developing that infrastructure is the roadmap to understanding if they're growing or shrinking or they're staying the same. You need to know that. If you're going to build a security program, you want to make sure that you understand if they're growing, you know you're going to have to create a platform. Storage is going to be a key to that, of course, but also identifying how that infrastructure is going to be built down the line. Define the physical security risks and controls. I mean, you have to know some of these questions to ask, and you also have to accept that there's some questions. If they can define that physical security risk and controls they already have, then they've done an assessment before. If they can't, they probably have never done an assessment. And then that leads, of course, to IT as well. So if you start asking them on the IT side, have you done a control-based assessment? Are you doing a minimum baseline security? Well, no, or yes. I've done pen testing, I've done vulnerability assessments, so at least I know the direction, that they have some form of knowledge. And we talked about that before. Are they smart or are they dumb? Business security gap assessment, the key is really doing that assessment on the fly to define the gaps that they have presently. So again, it's seeing are they smart or are they dumb. I know it's tough, but guys, we're consultants, we realize if the guy knows what he's doing, you'll know about it in the first, 2-3 answers. Build a roadmap and then train and test. So this is just the basis of it, and then we go from there. All right, so again, great stuff, and of course, I think Tom, you can actually, because you broke this. So your goal, what was your goal when you wrote this? What was your direction?
Well, the direction for putting the 10-point plan together is basically to put a project plan that can take it from the project concept all the way through completion and comply with all of the American and European compliance standards, HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA, and others. And also with any of the conventional accepted best practices for doing these projects. such as ISO 27001, the NIST framework, COVID, and others. So this is a program that does all of that. It also encompasses not only IT security, but also physical security in that same process. It's a project-managed approach, which is very attractive to the C-suite, as opposed to a kind of a haphazard approach. And finally, it does two things that none of the other processes do, both of which are extremely important. One of which is that it provides a pathway to the money. There's a novel thought. So built into this process is a little secret door, which we'll explain as we go through this, that can get the money for the project. And along with that, it provides the C-level executives, the financial decision makers, with the financial metrics that they need in order to make a good business decision. And so NIST doesn't do that, COVID doesn't do it, ISO 27000 doesn't do it, none of the compliance standards do that, and that's the missing piece from every project, is where does the money come from? So we'll talk a little bit about
Yes.
that.
Sam, one other question for you is that when you're dealing with, of course, now getting to the point where we have to find a way to build a plan, a roadmap, to allow us to get to the higher level decision maker. Do you see the format, and how does that apply to potentially your clients and your potential world IoT and smart cities?
So for most of my client base is government, so a lot of state and working with a lot of cities. So I actually start with steps 3 and 6. And because we have identified the money, whether it's internally through our government relations program, or there was a grant funding, like the recent USDOT grant funding for the Smart Cities Initiative. And so we have the money and we have the buy-in from those level, the C-suite level for the equivalent of government. But then what we need to go through is go and establish that foundation, finding out what it is you currently have, what deficiencies are in your systems, and that's where doing the risk analysis and also on the physical side, the risk analysis as well. And that's where our starting point is identifying what your foundation is, see where we're working from before we move on to steps 4 and 7.
Great. So I'm going to continue. We're going to get to now the meat and potatoes of this. Okay. Understanding what assets need to be protected, right? I mean, we talk about people. The issue is qualifying and quantifying people. What does that mean? And understanding their capabilities. Understanding are they the right people? Are they in the right framework? And that, by the way, that deals with not only the operational elements of implementation, but it also deals with the pre-implementation of, are they prepared for this monumental shift, or are they shift in technology? And at the same time, do they have governance in place to actually communicate and work together within the process of new technology being adapted in their environment? These are things that what people means. That's what it's all about. And part of the things I want to make sure is that it's about a people, process, and technology. My format is that you have to understand the people first, because that is our weakest link, by the way. Any technology that's implemented in any environment, technology should not come first. That's my opinion. I believe it strongly. I've seen it in so many different cases with so many larger companies, okay? So people, process, and technology. Business operations is about that process. This is, again, the keys to the kingdom in terms of bringing people in. I'm going to explain exactly how I've done it, and it's worked very well in large and mid-sized companies. Business reputation, the brand, that's critical. Before anything, whatever I create, whatever I make, if I'm a manufacturer to a technologist and I have a company that produces something for the general marketplace, my reputation is everything. If I screw up somewhere, it's over, okay? So we've seen that. All the breaches, the Target breach, Equifax, look at what's going on with them. Now, yes, do people still go buy things after a breach? Yes, we've seen that. But does the reputation element change? Does the methodology change in the way you purchase as a company? Yes. And so these are things that won't be determined for the next few years. These things just happen. By the way, it's been 3 years to 5 years with all these breaches. How has that affected? We don't have enough metrics yet to know if it's affecting them or not. And I think it will. Proprietary information, especially compliance-related information data, right? From HIPAA, high trust, PCI to you know, for NERD, every single area from utility sector all the way to, you know, HIPAA, high trust. Everything that you're dealing with, we're going to be really discussing on how this is effective. So, assessing to the needs of IT, and I think we're going to get through this. And this is kind of a methodology I created. I created a rating system. And the numbers on that rating system, so what I do is I say, look, here's a standard I'm going to pick. I wrote this out years ago, and of course, this is something I use, and it seems to work, especially on the technology side. University Security Converge Standard, product competitiveness. Is the product that you're, or products that you're using in your environment, the things that you're seeing, are they competitive? I mean, are people using them? Okay, product conversion approach. Do they have a product conversion approach? Does the client understand that, and do the products that they have in the environment, do they do that? Is there a secure process technology with IT/OT? Do they have security as an element of what they do and how they do it in their environment? And is technology part of that? You have to rate that as a 4, so that's something that's very heavily weighted. This is something you can use, and you can adapt it to your methodology and just add your percentage to what you believe is strong and not strong. Of course, everybody's going to have their own, you know, format. This is open source to use it. So, secure solution IT enabled. Are the system solution IT enabled? Can they communicate? Are they communicating? And of course, you know, this is also, if you do this as a measurement in terms of their operations and say, well, you know, from POS systems all the way to manufacturing process, you know, if they're still stamping things with one person pushing, you know, using a crank, well, we know there's a little problem there because inevitably, either if they're growing, they're going to have to eliminate that over time because they can't sustain that type of manufacturing. So inevitably, they're going to have to put an operating system that's going to be able to maintain that. So inevitably, they're going to want to obviously monitor that. Will they want to monitor that in video? Oh, maybe that's a process that we have to really put into the equation over time, a roadmap. So these are the kind of things you have to look at because this is something that makes you a trusted advisor. This makes you beyond just the security guy who's going to swing some cameras and be able to help them to really, you know, specify a couple of, you know, VMSs or access control features. I mean, that makes you different, right? That changes the game. And that also brings other people to the table pretty quickly. So, is it seamless integration? Is there seamless integration with the systems that they have, or can it be? That's a three. Open architecture, open APIs. Are there solutions that are communicating and can they talk to each other? You know, API accessibility, storage integration. All these things are critical in regards to what you ask. Again, change the questions, add the questions, do what you have to do. Now, using that, you take it to the next stage. You go assessing to the needs of IT baseline reality. IT-enabled solution again, competitive pricing in the global market is a solution. Level of technology advancement, established norms in security and life safety from 2010 to 2017. Anything before 2010, it's legacy. It's systems that, look, they're probably going to have to be adjusted because the market has changed so quickly. They're not going to be IT enabled. They're not going to be IT enabled. They're not going to be IP enabled. We're going to have to look at that seriously. So that's my B mark, is 2010. People will say, well, that's, you know, I mean, there's stuff in there that's from 2008, 2007, I don't care. 2010, 2017. Then we go beyond that over time, and then we can change that. Specification strengths in the global market. These are critical questions, right? What is the specification strength in the global market for the solutions you're looking at? If they aren't, then you better be careful because you're going to go down a slippery slope pretty quickly. And you're going to realize those systems are probably not going to communicate as well as you want it to be, or they're not going to be expanding over different markets under compliance or other regulatory arenas. So integrator loyalty in the global market. Now, again, this comes down to getting help. If you have a global company or a company that's a national company, or you are even looking at a regional company, if you don't have somebody as an integrator who really has loyalty in the market and or understands what the heck they're doing with technology, you might have to question your decision. Convergent approach and capabilities over IT, physical security, and IoT. You have to look at to say, is the system capable of this convergent approach? 9 times out of 10, anything before 2010 does not. It just doesn't. Anything beyond 2010, you have to really question it. So the question I'm going to ask, and for both of you, from today's experience, from the experiences you've had in the marketplace in the last, so Tom, you'll be the first person. From the standpoint of specification all the way to conversion approach, right? What is your philosophy in regards to working with clients and understanding what's important, what's not important in regards to addressing this, okay, from an operational aspect and a security aspect?
And by converged approach, you mean integrating the security system with the IT infrastructure of the business organization and the other units that may use that, such as HVAC, sprinkler systems, lighting systems, and so on.
Correct.
Okay, fine. So a very wise man suggested that you begin that discussion by bringing up, by asking what are all of the other systems that connect to this infrastructure. And when we're talking about integrating the security system into that, or expanding an already integrated security system into that, then we bring those stakeholders into the discussion. A very wise man. And so that was Pierre. And those stakeholders become allies in that discussion to look at making the IT security system robust enough to segment each of those onto its own VLAN, to provide segmentation so that if somebody is able to hack into one system through, for example, a USB chip, very common entry point into these systems, and something that virtually every firewall doesn't deal with properly. So that's an important thing to understand. Honestly, that is the biggest vulnerability to these systems once the basic things have been taken care of. So by getting those stakeholders at the table, you begin to establish critical mass in the discussion, and it takes on a life of its own then.
Sam, what do you think? What's your advice on this?
I agree, but I would, moving from looking at it from the key stakeholders, which were your trusted advisors, these people, I look at it from also another standpoint. You have to look at it when the system is being implemented, and a key component of that is actually the system integrator, and being able to use the specification that you come up with to identify the right individuals for that. I say the right individuals because companies are made up of people, and you could have a A-level or a B-level integrator, but which people are they sending to that job? So there has to be something in your specification that's like ironclad that makes them send you the A team for your project, or at least the right people for that project, not a representative of the team that they could showcase, but someone who's actually going to be on site to implement the solution.
Can I add one thing to my previous comments and also to yours, Samuel? And that is that when you're converging a variety of systems together, it's compellingly important to make sure that the weakest link is not the weakest link. And by that I mean, a reference was made in an earlier session here about how sometimes some systems like sprinkler systems, HVAC and energy control systems may use consumer-grade switches to perform their functions. That's just not acceptable in today's environment. I'll give you an example of how not acceptable it is. A central bank in Malaysia, it wasn't Malaysia,
It's actually
Bangladesh, yeah, was attacked by North Korea, and $80 million was transferred from the Central Bank of Bangladesh into casinos in the Philippines, where it was laundered over a weekend, and the money then was transported off to North Korea. So a good time was had by everybody except the Central Bank of Bangladesh. How did they get in? They got in through consumer-grade firewalls and switches, Netgear equipment of that type, at a central bank, for heaven's sakes. Right. And so, and we think, oh, well, we'd never do that at a critical infrastructure facility, and yet you look at some of the systems that are attached to it, and what do you see? Consumer-grade switches. So that stuff has to go. That becomes part of that converged approach discussion.
So the question was, so how do you do that, right? So we get to the point of, okay, Pierre, that's great, but I'm having a hard time getting the C-suite in. So what I have done, and what has worked for me, is I first of all list the 3 areas. I focus in on the areas that we're going to be working on. If it's access control, video management, say storage. And so access control, video management are the key points. So what I have done is I will get that to the person I'm dealing with, if it's the IT administrator or the IT infrastructure administrator, or if it's the CIO, or if it's even a security director. I say, look, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go to all the stakeholders in your business and show this document. I want you to just send it to them. And I'll try to get a response within the first 2 weeks of what areas of their business that video affects them. And what happens is a miracle, because everybody has a stake in the game. Everybody wants to say something. And 9 times out of 10, what I found is people that you never would have thought would have respond. Head of HR, head of shipping, head of receiving, head of the shop floor, all of a sudden I've got people responding to the security director and saying, and he's like looking and saying, my gosh, they're actually interested. They're interested in what I'm doing because I'm allowing them in. For the first time in, forever, I'm actually communicating with the rest of the people in the business. So the reality is that I think what's important is to realize that these small things you can do, and there's no reason not to, is to give them a list of the things, of its capabilities of a typical PMS. And this is also a way to understand what is their interest? What are the things that they're actually worried about? Because in many cases, they haven't communicated that to anyone. They've dealt with them, but they won't discuss it. So the key is to make it an open forum within the business to allow people to really validate the problem. And that, guys, I know it's so simple, right? Keep it simple, stupid, but do it. Trust me, you may be surprised what you get. Now, I don't see any company that's going to say no to that because they're doing an open forum internally, and then he decides what's going to come back.
What's in that document?
So what I can do is I will share that with you guys, because what it is basically, and I know all this is going to be shared with you guys. I plan on actually sharing you how I do these things. And I'm going to give it to Ray. I want him to pass it out as an open format, because to be honest with you, if we all don't start doing the right thing soon, we're going to be extinct in today's world. So we have to start doing the right things to get ourselves in a position that we can have the trusted position. So in that document, you pretty much will say video management solutions, and then have a whole series of things that will apply to every area of each side of the business. So different types of solutions that you and I know should be there. And then immediately what he gets, the person has gone back is, well, I'm interested in this and how this happens. And you can make it more complicated, more specific, or as specific as you'd like. That allows really the people to start getting back to you and actually conversing about their problems.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. We'll discuss about the assessment of the needed place. Sometimes you have in-house needed, which you can replace. It doesn't have the necessarily, the integral in place doesn't have the necessarily skills to do the converged approach. And my question is, how do you bring them up to speed with education, or what do you do in this case? Can you repeat that?
I understood the question. I don't know if I can repeat the entire thing verbatim, but the gist of the question is, if you have an integrator that's in-house and they don't have the expertise, or they're not up to the level of, say, intelligence in order to adequately implement the solution, how do you go about suggesting or recommending someone else or bringing someone else into the project enabled for you to implement that solution? So in most of my business, my group is considered the trusted advisor. We're an extension of the client. So we have open, candid conversations. We actually go through and have they're called technical steering committees, where we bring in, like Pierre was saying, key stakeholders. One of the most important ones is early on bringing in IT, but it might go through and you're looking at, if it was an airport, you're looking at a TSA representative, you're looking at the planning and engineering department, and people along those lines. We always have to have a person from IT. So going through and discussing the nuances of what, and also one of the key people, what you're referring to, is probably a maintenance person. So you have the head of maintenance there as well. They're usually responsible for the upkeep of most of the systems that we're dealing with. IT is also what you would assume to be involved, but that's not as apparent and as often as you would expect. So most of the time I'm dealing with maintenance staff, the head of maintenance that's doing the actual upkeep of these products. So when you go through and you're doing an assessment, a technology assessment, you're looking at, okay, these are the different technologies that are in place. We're doing assessment to see what kind of technologies you may need to upgrade or replace. Then you go through and have these discussions. And quickly, when you have these discussions with all of the people present, you'll be able to showcase that the team that they have in place may not be the best team for implementation. And if you actually do that in a subtle manner without offending the actual representative from that or agency or that division, they'll be open to having someone come on staff to initially help you with that implementation, as long as you have a training process, which I think was one of the points in there before, where they can then bring their staff up to the level that you need in order for them to be administrative power users and be able to maintain the system after it's been put in place properly.
Okay, before we get into more questions, I'm going to continue, and then we're going to get into some questions, and then you guys are going to be able to answer. Do you have any statements?
No, go ahead.
Okay, very good. So last two were ease of use and configuration, and then adherence to compliance requirements set forth by regulatory bodies. And of course, we talked about all of those. So questions to ask. So I start with governance, because unfortunately communication, and as I said, this is the question of how do you bring the stakeholders to the table? How is the information that is received by alerts used and set policy and procedures at all locations? Wow, that's a pretty important question. But unfortunately, no one really asks that because it's hidden from the standpoint of the primary functions of technology. What are the most critical business processes to the continuing operation of the business? A good question that really brings in everybody is, do you have a COOP plan? I mean, do you have a continuity of operation plan, which really is a federal requirement for most, in effect, most regulated markets? So these are kind of things, and I get 9 times out of 10, believe it or not, they're going to say no. Well, in the continuity of operation plan, a lot of the control sets that are required for security are there, and the operational part of it are tied to other things. So if it's a food manufacturer, there'll be FDA requirements as well. So this is like an open, when you ask that question, it's extremely weighted, and just be prepared to answer it if they really want to know. What people, locations, and data support these business processes? Again, real simple question, right? But a very weighted answer. And if you start getting that path, and again, you can do this based upon what you feel is important based upon the business you're working with. One of the things that, a little trick here that really I use, is I research the industry that I'm going to be working with. If I'm working with a manufacturer, and specifically in the food industry, or if it's going to be tool and die, or if it's going to be a utility of a power company, I'm going to research and I'm going to identify the strengths and weaknesses before I even show up. So I know this is like basic stuff, but I really am amazed that a lot of people don't do these things anymore. And I think that the question is, I don't have time. Well, my God, do you want to earn the contract, earn the business, or do you not want to earn the business? So what? Yes.
On the governance issue, this gets back to quality of specifications again. We're all used to writing specifications that have certain hammers in them for enforcement. And when it comes to the IT security portions, I've written a couple of just real big, 10-pound sledgehammers into the specifications that just drive IT security maintenance conformance, because that's where it all comes apart like a cheap suit. So and one of those was that if the integrator or any representative of the integrator ever installs an unauthorized access point to the system, whether it's a wireless access point or I've seen, you know, switches plugged into switches. In one case, a hub plugged into a switch. That's easy to trace. So anyhow, the provision in the specification is that the renewable annual maintenance agreement is terminated upon discovery of that device, and they have to re-qualify for that competitively. And let me tell you, they don't want to do that. So the word goes out to their maintenance guys that they're never, ever, under any circumstances, to do that. And there were a couple of other instances like that. So we had 3 instances in the specifications that would cause termination of the maintenance agreement.
And I think that one thing that's also important is to really understand the value of that specification regards across the company-wide. And the stakeholder, if you're dealing with IT, which sometimes, and a lot of times I do, they're actually saying, look, we need to keep controls in place to eliminate, you know, our people in different parts of the country or the globe to start implementing solutions because they're trying to fix a problem without telling anybody. And what ends up happening is that, well, you know, they needed a communication device in the field, and we found this and just need to put this out there so that they could talk to someone in the plant. Well, they didn't realize that that communication device was directly tied to the network once it hit the plant. And all of a sudden now it was an open port that had no security measures put into place and was not part of the network infrastructure support stacks for managed services or wherever they do on the network side. So all of this stuff is critical. That is, in effect, governance. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about governance. We're not talking about this weird, obscure thing like it used to be. You know, people used to say governance, and they're talking about, well, that's corporate governance. What does that have to do with security? Security governance is exactly that, right? We have to create the right policies and procedures.
To add on to that really quickly, I was recently working on a project where we went through and deployed 400 IP cameras for an upgrade. And this system integrator basically said that they didn't want to change the username and passwords, the default username and passwords, because it was easier for them to go through and configure them with the defaults in place. And it might be a couple of weeks to a month before they went through and were intending on changing those passwords until IT found out about it, and then they were basically forced to do so.
So, and that's, again, governance. And if you don't put that into your process, you're assuming they know better. And, you know, this goes harks back to the conversations we had today about liability. Either you're going to understand that they're going to accept the liability, you're going to accept the liability. Who's accepting this liability? Inevitably, you are part of the problem or part of the solution. And so what's important to do is you have to be proactive in trying to be part of the solution, making sure that you've done these things to not only protect your clients, but also make them aware that these are the things you should be doing, okay, in the process of security governance and really security systems upgrading or infrastructure support or infrastructure design. What do you presently use information that is received from technology products? I mean, again, this just leads to more questions and more answers. How do you presently validate the use of technology with existing policies, procedures, and do you assess against the results? Well, you know, that's what we talked about, you know? I mean, that question's loaded, but that really tells me if they are not really assessing to ensure that those security elements are there, then you know they're immature. You know they're on the dumb scale, which is okay. Smart, dumb. If they're dumb, you know what you're dealing with, and you know what you have to do to educate them. If they can answer these questions, trust me, they've already gone down the path of J-curve, and they're already up at the top. How would a loss or disruption affect the bottom line? This affects the food plan, this affects your exact DR plan. You then know if they can answer that question, they may have a DR plan, they actually have a continuity of operation, they have a storage redundancy, they understand the methodology, and you can go right into the conversation. You know that they already understand the importance of these things. Are key man protocols in place to ensure continuity of operation? Again, leading to the fact that they understand executive process and they understand that insurance plays a role. Does the current electronic security technology appropriately mitigate risk? Well, that's a loaded question, of course, but that leads to the understanding is, do you understand what risk is? So the goal is to really get them to start thinking, what does risk mean to you? How do you know, or are you measuring anything? So we know one thing, right? From our experience, the key is metrics. How can we gain metrics to really justify why, right? And so if they can't justify why anyway, this really is a meaningless conversation, and we're really looking at a tactical solution. But if we get beyond this ridiculous conversation and get beyond this to get to a meaningful solution, then we're really talking about bringing all this together. Questions to as physical security. Are your doors intelligent? I mean, that's just, when we say the doors intelligent, they got to get in somehow, or are they intelligent? Do they have any communication, collaboration to give us metrics, information, right? That's critical. Does your BMS fully integrated into access management and business controls? These are things you ask anyway, all right? I get it. Are you presently using cameras, BMS access control to help mitigate operational HR risk? Okay. So that question, to me, is important to ask. And that immediately leads to how people can bring together the stakeholders. In that question, you were saying, hey, are you using this to mitigate stuff in the operational and HR environment? That means there's something for them to do. This is something for you to really take into account when you're dealing with your video management system. So, do you currently use metrics to define threats for compliance purposes? What is your storage solution for video management? I mean, I just wanted you to see that where we're going with this is critical to the direction of doing a converged assessment, because you're bringing stakeholders and then you're identifying risks and opportunity to grow that security infrastructure correctly, so that we're not just doing a hodgepodge solution. So how do you integrate technology and policy and procedures? Again, this leads to the fact that are we discovering that they have something in place? Again, I'm not saying you're going to ask all these questions, guys, but what I am going to say is that you're going to take some of these type of questions and begin to apply them and direct them to the right person. We haven't gotten, so I'm going to get into this IT, and then we're going to ask some questions and move forward from there. So what is your credentialing strategy? Again, very important, all right? Credentialing is going to be the key in the future. There are a few things that you have to be very aware of. It's credentialing, it's metadata, okay, it's information transfer, and how to make it visible, right, to the end user. How do they manage security? How do they secure their environment by developing the evolution of a safe environment, safe and secure environment? So, it's a lot of questions here, so I'm going to read this, but I'm going to kind of ask you, all right? And then I want you guys to kind of open up to I think this is, yeah. So
how much time do we have left?
About 28. Perfect. So, perfect. So, questions to ask IT. Have you segmented your physical security solutions such as video and access control from your IT environment, right? Good question, simple question, straightforward. Allows them to really get to that point. So in these questions, there's critical aspects of getting and drawing in you as an expert. Because what that means is you're not an IT expert, but you understand the value of IT, and you understand the value of it in your design. So I'm going to have you kind of speak to this, because it's a very important part of the whole thing of bridging this from the security point.
Oh, thanks so much.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, but that's what we want to do.
All right, so can you condense that question?
So the question I'm going to ask is this. From the standpoint of everything that we've discussed,
yes,
right, in regards to converged assessments, we're defining a roadmap to bring in physical to IT and be able to bring them to the table and make the security consultant a trusted advisor to not only the people they've dealt with in the past, but the IT side of the fence. And so I want to know if these type of questions work and what the approach we're taking, if it works as well, so that they can take home something that really they can use tomorrow.
Yeah, first of all, I think all these questions are pertinent and useful. One approach that I've taken in the past that has somehow been successful, one thing that I think all of us have experienced across our careers is that there's basically two security units in every large corporation. There's IT security and there's physical security. These two, the CIO, CISO, and the Chief Security Officer of the organization, these two entities are like spy versus spy from Mad Magazine. You know what I'm saying? And it's ironic because they have exactly the same mission in the organization, which is to protect the organization. And yet they see each other as competitors, not collaborators in that. And so one of the, I think, the really important things that we can do as consultants is to help the other spy, if you will, to understand that we're here to collaborate with them on the common mission. So we start the discussion about our common mission, we get agreement on that, and then we talk about how we can help them do that. Now, almost without exception, IT directors, CIOs, see the addition of a security system or the expansion of a security system as an infringement upon their bandwidth. How many times have we heard that? Okay? So let's flip that argument, because I'm very, very fond of flipping arguments. So let's flip that argument and say, instead of we're going to be infringing on your bandwidth, how can we use this system to get you a lot more bandwidth? And now we become an ally to them instead of a competitor to them. And so when we talk about using the physical security project as a means by which they can achieve some of the things that they've never been able to get budget to do, then all of a sudden we become the guy that they want to go to lunch with all the time, or the woman that they want to go to lunch with. And so that's a technique that I found to be extremely useful. But we have to get on the same page with these folks and let them understand that we're their ally, we're not their competitor. So
yeah, and I think that one of the things is the language we speak. I think that we're going to have to start speaking that type of language so that it's acceptable not only to IT but also the stakeholders. So, you know, when I say, you know, from a business purpose standpoint, you know, you have to really accept one thing, that today the world is converging every day, and I'm going to have a question for Sam about this, but you know, with all of that in mind, with all this technology that is coming to bear, the IoT environment, everything that is being used in terms of bring your own device, you know, OSINT technology in regards to, you know, let's be frank, it's open source intelligence is also an issue. There's all these things that are being, you know, really propagated in the environment. We have to be aware of it, and we talked about it throughout the sessions. The environment's growing outside the perimeter, beyond the perimeter, and we have to know how to help the client. So IT is being burdened, but they also can be helped by you asking the right questions and getting, you know, other people to the table to expand that budget. This is all about expansion of the budget and expansion of your, and we'll just say, you know, I think in many cases as a consultant, you want the responsibility to a certain degree of having more of a say and in effect expanding your ability to help the client. And you want that long-term relationship, not just that short-term where you're there at one point and then they don't call you for 2 years because, you know, they've had all this stuff take place and they realize, you know, I need him again because honestly, we're just not where we want to be, right? So we're in a deteriorated state of where we were, and, you know, it's like almost the worst thing in the world. Well, it's 2 years, now we're going to replace everything again. You just don't want to hear that anymore. Because things have changed so much, we need to get out of that environment. So the question I have for Sam, and Sam is involved in really the push for smart cities. And I want you all to realize that that's not just going to happen in, you know, the municipality type environment. That same concept is happening in utilities and in large corporations that need to have one pane of glass visibility about virtually everything in their environment. They want to see things taking place that allows them to manage security properly, manage safety properly. So in that vein, right, and we're talking about a lot of these things, where do you see, from the standpoint of risk assessment and the ability to really, formulate a path for a client when you deal with this quick expansion, this fast expansion outward? How can we help as consultants, as you're dealing with the design piece and you're dealing with on this other side in terms of implementation? How can we help in terms of mitigating that, or at least helping the client understand this art?
Well, I would say that the first and foremost thing is education. Being able to educate your client on what and where the industry is going. For instance, I deal with a lot of government sector projects, so we deal with surface transportation, where for intelligent transportation systems, we're deploying thousands of sensors. And traditionally, those industries have dealt with isolated networks. They weren't really focused on any security or vulnerabilities that might be introduced because that wasn't the nature of the beast for them. Now with all these sensors being deployed and the Internet of Things, and then the whole premise behind smart city initiatives is interconnectivity. So I want to be able to have my traffic management center talk to my police department, talk to my fire department, interoperate, and be able to communicate with the healthcare division in that area and some private businesses. So now you have all of this information that's just flowing. And so you have to change the mindset of your clients where they're looking at it from we're secure in our little bubble to now we're exposed. And how do we go through and mitigate our exposure and our vulnerabilities? And so you help them along the process, evaluating, because the big thing of what we do is evaluating technology. So we go out there and look in the market, see what's out there that helps fit their needs, achieve their business objectives, and then walk them through the process of why we're selecting these technologies and what benefits come with that and what safeguards are we implementing in what they're trying to accomplish. And that's like one of the biggest things. You have to be able to communicate that information to different parties. So being able to wear a different hat for different stakeholders you're talking to, because when I'm talking to the police department, their interests and their priorities are totally different than the traffic management department or a hospital and what they want to do. But the overall goal is taking that information, being able to take all that data and aggregate it and make it actionable so they can utilize it and be more efficient in what they're all trying to accomplish.
Any questions? I mean, we have about 10, 15 minutes. What other questions do you have that, are things that you would like to see? And, we're going to try to give you as much information from this and send it to you guys, or we'll give it to also the questionnaires. Go ahead.
Maybe cynical.
Yes.
But I find that clients always expect us to do all this stuff anyway. Right? They put out an RFP to enhance a camera system. Let's say you take it from analog to IP. You work on code, quote low, and we win it. And then we come in and they want us to do all this stuff. Right? So what do you guys say? Like how do you get fees to do it? Because they expect you to do it anyway.
So a lot of what you're saying, I agree with 100% what you're saying. So they're expected to do all that, but your expectation is totally different than reality of things. So if there's nothing that stipulates I have to do this, when I go through a lot of projects we do are design bid build. So I go through, I design something, then it's put out the bid, and the lowest bid is what wins the project. So if I haven't spelled out exactly what your requirements are and what you're expected to do, if I don't say you have to do a vulnerability test on the front end to find out and do a gap analysis and go through at the end and make sure that no vulnerabilities have been introduced to the system, you're not going to do it because that's going to drive your price up. So it's on the, I like to consider it more of a solution architect than a system designer. You have to look at it from a comprehensive standpoint, and you have to know what you want at the beginning of the project and the end of the project, and have to spell that out so it becomes a level playing field, so all the system integrators are qualified and they actually know what they're bidding on.
Can I add to that also that there's a different approach that I've used historically between converged and independent systems. With an independent system, I basically design two systems. One is the physical security system, and the second is the IT infrastructure and the security for that infrastructure. So, and you'll notice that there's a delicate but important separation. You can't have the IT physical security system without the infrastructure, right? Okay, so but we run those as two separate projects.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that we get, it gets the recognition that it isn't just a bunch of wires on the security system. It is itself an independent system. And so, and obviously, you know, the question is, well, are we going to secure the security system that secures billions of dollars worth of assets for the organization? Well, that's a slam dunk. The answer to that is yes, right? And then if we're talking about a converged system, then the default position in our proposal with them is that the organization will provide the IT security, and we will provide some guidelines that are important, taking into consideration the compliances that are obvious on that system.
Okay. Your answer is due to the proposal.
Yes, my question's more open-ended because I'm not sure how to ask it correctly. But we see a lot of new risks that have sprung up. And in order to plug the hole that these risks represent, costs money. So it's great to do this assessment. To do an assessment costs money, and then to actually do what the assessment suggests also costs more money. So can someone speak to a procedure or a best practice to convince the client, the building owner, the company, to take money out of their budget to do what we're suggesting?
So I
Pierre, do you want to?
So I think that, you know, that's exactly what kind of we posed as the answer to this, is that you have to bring these stakeholders to the table to pass. So I always say, you've got to take that budget and cross it over IT, OT, physical security, and every area, okay, of the business process that is affected by video and access control. You will find that most of the business is affected by today's world. I don't care what you do in a company, you will be affected by it. So I think it's key is that as the faster you get to getting them on board and doing it in very, listen, simplistic ways, as passing that information about what here are the different solutions within video management solutions, access control, if it's life safety, which affect mustering, which affect, of course, your disaster recovery plans, all of this. All of a sudden you see that there are people within the entire business that, hey, I'm raising my hand, I've got a problem. Well, in every one of those people, the shipping, the receiving, in terms of plant operations, they all have budgets. And if you can pass that budget across the entire business, or the C-suite realizes this is affecting our operation. And one of the things, the point of reference I have is just the last assessment, the assessment I'm doing now for a large food manufacturer in the United States, is that, Pierre, I have to tell you that if it is anywhere related to plant operations and how we can actually improve and qualify, loss, and in many cases, if you can bridge that with analytics and define certain issues that we're doing wrong or something that takes place that's costing us money, in one area, we're going to save them $108,000 per year, right? Just one small area. We haven't even got to the other areas yet. And that's a reality. That's not something that's produced out of nowhere. But how did I get there? I got there because I had stakeholders raising their hand. Now, if I bring that to the C-suite, C-suite's going, well, this is just going to justify itself pretty quickly, isn't it? It's like, yeah, it does when you have the right people, and the right questions that you're asking that are getting them to them.
Pierre, on that last question, can I take just maybe 3 minutes and show how to use the risk analysis to generate the budget for the project?
Yes.
Can you go back to the slide that shows
We've got 4 minutes, 4 minutes, so that's perfect.
Okay, great.
No more questions.
So this is the central issue, is where do we get the money for all this, right? So, I'm sorry? Oh, sure, yeah.
So really quickly, one approach is to go through and do a feasibility study, and that could be a very low-cost initial assignment where you can go through and do a cost assessment. That gives you basically the projected budget. So then it lets them know, okay, we're dealing with a project of this magnitude, and they can evaluate from the standpoint whether it's a phased deployment or it's something they can go through and do with the current budget they have in place.
Okay, so, and that's really great. That's important. If we take a look up here at this 10-point plan, 3, 4, and 5 is dealing with risk analysis and gap analysis and the implementation development plan for IT. 6, 7, and 8 is the equivalent on physical security. But up here at the top, we start with get C-level commitment. How do we do that? We have a meeting with the C-level executive, and in that meeting, it's a 30-minute meeting typically, and we create a compelling and urgent case for providing IT security for the security system. And we do that typically by talking about compliances. There are certain compliances that will not only, if we have a breach, they'll not only penalize the organization, but they will literally reach into the wallets of the C-level executives themselves and extract money from their own wallets for failing to be in compliance. So HIPAA is one of those. So in these cases, we can do two things in that discussion. Number one is we can get an agreement. We want to do these two things in that. We want to get an agreement to do the discovery portions of the project. And so when we walk out, we have an agreement to do the discovery portions. That's all the way down to here, okay? And the second one that we want is because they have an intrinsic vested interest financially, not only for a fiduciary interest for their organization, but they themselves are affected financially by a breach. We want to ask them to name a C-level executive as the Chief Security Compliance Officer for the organization, so that that person has a direct line of oversight into compliance for the organization. And what does that do? Everything has its opposite. That gives us an advocate in the C-suite, which is where the money decisions are made and where the money comes from. All right, so that's our first step. If we look at the risk analysis over on IT, and we have our equivalent on physical security. The risk analysis includes a threat analysis, right? A vulnerability analysis, and then a risk equation, all right? So what we're going to add is two more things. So know your obligations. This tells us what the compliance standards tell us we must be doing. And then we do a threat analysis, and then we do something that nobody is doing out here today. But this is what the financial decision makers need. And that is we do a consequence analysis. So if we have a major breach, a worst case breach, what will be the cost for loss of data for an hour, for a day, for a week? What would be the cost if our data gets into the hands of WikiLeaks or our competitor? What would be the cost of mitigation and recovery? What would be the compliance penalties? We can put numbers to all those things. So now we have a financial metric that creates the equivalent of a return on investment. So when it comes down to, we finished our gap analysis after we've done the risk analysis. So we know what our gap is. And then we can put together a security implementation plan and a budget for that. They can make a financial decision based upon the threats, the vulnerabilities, the overall risk, and the cost of this budget vis-a-vis the cost of the worst case consequences.
And so based on, you can see there's a few directions here that we've kind of given you a little bit of insight on what the end user is going to be accepting in regards to bringing those stakeholders to the table. And I am going to make available kind of the exact same scenario in terms of rating technology that we do, or that I do as well, is really to give them those consequences from the standpoint of current state and desired state and future state, right? And really understanding each area so that the client then realizes immediately, wait a minute, so this is our current state, and this is our current state of technology, which we may be a 2 out of a 4, all right? It's a 1 to 4 scale. But we also know that this is the future state. Now, if the future state takes place, this is what I may have the ability to save in regards to potential liability and cost. If you can get to even just the bare elements of some of that, even just looking and using current technology in regards to analytics on the video side to improve operational excellence, improve shipping and receiving, improve the process of production. And if you start getting to that discussion because you open that door, they are more than willing to travel with you, to go to their plants and sit down with the decision makers and say, Pierre, and guess what I'm doing? That's exactly what they're allowing me to do. You have a chance to take control and become that true trusted advisor to walk them through the path to get them to the end result. And then when the integrator finally says, well, I don't do that kind of system, well, then you're not going to be integrating this. End of story. We're going to get somebody that does.
So, a lot of great discussion on operational and physical vulnerabilities, but when it comes to risk and risk identification, specifically IT-based risks or converged risk environment, is there any recommendations on helping identify those risks so we can bring those in for converged assessment?
Yes, so, okay, from that standpoint, now, I don't know if you guys are comfortable with the CMMI rating system. So using the CMMI rating system allows at least the basic intent of SAN 40, or so to identify the primary gaps. And that at least gives you a roadmap, right? So using CMMI, remember, just write it down, you'll be able to get it from SAN and be able to define that roadmap from the IT risk side. Now, that is a controls-based assessment. Don't think that this is connecting people, process, and technology. This is really a controls-based assessment to define those threats within the IT environment. But it really helps. Okay, it's a good starting point. Just keep this in mind. And we're going to end very. So how much time do we have? 4 minutes. 4 minutes, perfect. So we're going to have some questions. So one other thing that says, I want you to understand where this thing is going when we're talking about IT and physical security. Think of your assessments as the highest level of security and the lowest level of risks. If it's a, and I'm going to write it down real quick, because it's something that kind of helps you visually look at this, right? So think about this. Here's infrastructure. This is everything that you have built or people have built. Here is, so this is security, and this is risk, okay? Your assessments should be in this net where you have the highest level of security, the lowest level of risk, and the connection of all the different departments. This is, we call this enterprise risk at the top. But what we have is when we have issues, incidences take place. Our goal is to really define the incident to the business risk. If it's HR, if it's financial, if whatever it is. If you can take the stakeholders and identify those threats to that business risk and create an assessment that truly connects the two, and you become the trusted advisor to finally define this infrastructure, because it now has the ability to, of course, once you have that assessment, you've defined that threats can be mitigated through the proper technology.
I like that a lot.
And that's a simple way for you to use in terms of explaining to your client how this works. And then from that point, you can then take them down the path. And I've used this countless times with the largest companies in the world. I can just list them. And this simplified little sketch gets them to say, oh, you're not enterprise risk. You're not really the technology. You are really bridging this so that my people can really understand it. So in HR, in finance, in operations, in plant, all of a sudden now, we've solved it, right? And then we can go on and really act like mature adults. Yes?
You talked earlier about the integrator issue and quality of services. I think we've forgotten, the owner is marrying the manufacturer. And I asked my manufacturer I talked to, do you have tech support? They're in the specs. It may cost $20,000, $30,000 in a large project to get them out there, but now they know the client, they know the operation, they know the integrator, they know the issues are being done. If that integrator falls flat in his face, they gotta find someone else to service it.
So we're going to validate that with this assessment to define if you look at that rating system, and I'm going to give them how that liability score, that risk score is not appropriate, I'm going to say, Mr. Client, I know you've had this legacy system in there for 20 years, and you really have a friend who's taken you to dinner so many times and he loves you, but the reality is that you're causing a major issue in regards to the ability of your business to succeed over time and run in a lean process and a risk-free process. So your choice.
We treat the integrator as an element of risk.
Question?
Yes.
So, and I don't know which of you three this goes to, or maybe more than one person can answer, but could you characterize for us, pick one project and say like what sector, business sector it is, roughly the size of the company, and then characterize the timeline for us from when you first entered into discussions all the way to completion, if you can, of what the few major phases might be?
Okay, I'll try to get a stab at this really quickly so I'm running out of time. So, project, once again, I'll reference an airport. That was about a 3-year project from initial engagement, going through, like I was saying before, doing a feasibility study to go figure out what the cost assessment was, being able to find out what the budget needed to be, being able to get the funds to go through and do that, and then did a phased approach for that. From that feasibility study and that conceptual plan, we went into actual design. From that design, we then went into the bidding portion of that. We brought in a series of different system integrators to go through and do a converged solution. And then we stayed on the project for construction phase services. So basically, we were the client's rep, and we would watch over the system area and make sure the design intent was implemented. So that entire project was a 3-year span from beginning to end. It was about a $12 million project. Does that address all the questions you asked?
So for the feasibility assessment part, like, or whatever you did initially, and then all the rest of the assessing that you did, what were those timeframes?
The feasibility study was a span of like 4 months. Design took about another 10 months, 10, 12 months. And then the actual implementation was the rest of the time. I think that's almost like 2 years.
Okay.
So I've got 10 plants, 9 plants, food manufacturer in the U.S. The entire initial step in terms of assessment took about a month and a half, okay, in total. And after that, the design piece took about 2 months. And then from that, the installation, which is about a year.
Okay.
So that's more a smaller version of
Right.
that. But it's really, the assessment side can range, okay? If you've got everybody you can speak to at each plant, you can go to visit and you can define those environments and validate. You have to validate what people are saying. You have to identify them with your own eyes, or you have to identify them with people that can tell you that. Then, once you've done that, you can then validate, you can write a report that's clearly definable in regards to the current state. Once you've done that, you can then work with everything that you see as being the solutions and work with the manufacturers and define kind of what makes sense in regards to the solution. That's typically the way it works.
And Tom, one last question. How do you find it works out when you're doing the combined physical security, IT security assessment? How do you, from the beginning of the project, keep a focus so that the two elements in terms of however you want it balanced, are kind of in balance, and so that the IT security part doesn't run away with it because they have more stakeholders or that kind of stuff? What helps on your end to keep that balance?
The establishment of metrics up front for judging the project.
Okay.
And that's critical. Metrics side, as we talked about, you have to have the metrics on every single part of that process. Back into the SOW, yes. Any other questions?
Sure, but I think we're out of time, right?
Actually, I did have a question for Samuel. I mean, I love that. I think that's a great tool, and I think it's a great way to explain to an end user a very quick way to look at the overall project requirements and how they need to assess it. Having said that, I think if I'm the city of Chicago and I've got $1 billion invested in the bottom of that, how do I take that 30-year-old SCADA system and have that smart city conversation and get those stakeholders in the room to
Samuel, you probably have more experience at that specific kind of application than I do, but in general, to answer your question, I have never found a legacy data system that couldn't be integrated into an up-to-date TCP/IP infrastructure and secured properly.
SCADA system?
SCADA system, sure. Yeah, you just put it on a TCP/IP infrastructure, so you encapsulate it.
And you have to control both sides of the PLC to ensure that you have security, right? So as long as you have those control pieces, you in effect secure the environment. That's really critical, that's all. Make it smart, and that's good, you're good to go.
You can basically encapsulate any protocol in any other protocol.
Correct.
And so once you put it in a capsule that will go across TCP/IP infrastructure,
Yeah,
it doesn't matter.
most of that stuff's all running on BACnet and it's been around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. By the way, I used to make, it's a little secret. I used to make security systems just disappear on converged infrastructures before I had access to proper security. And the way that I would do that is just encapsulate every single bit of the security IP inside NetBuoy.
Make sure you also, in your final, I guess the bingo card, please write down your rating. There's a couple more questions. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to add to the, at least on the SCADA side, that conversation, luckily, is already forcibly being started. With the NERSIP requirements, those systems have to become secured. It's not a trivial thing to encapsulate everything into IP and bring these legacy systems up to regular levels of security, but it must be done. So it is being done.
Just talk about smart cities for a second. When you're talking to a city about using technologies and sensors to help with data sharing, make it a smarter city and all, they're investing money into making the city a smarter city, but at the same time, you're adding additional costs because they're obviously increasing cybersecurity. So how do you go about promoting smart cities, but then there's also an increasing cost on cybersecurity?
You have to relate it towards something that's an investment that the actual constituents of the city can see a value in. So you don't really propose it as a smart city, usually a safer, secure city, a more livability aspect to it. So you're looking at it from a healthcare standpoint, a security standpoint, and then you're using that as a catalyst for you to go through and implement the technology as a mechanism in which it happens.
I didn't have problems with that argument because when we have bombs going off and car bombs going off in the city, people are generally in favor of security.
Typically a marketing thing where you're doing it as an amenity.
So quick question. When you're talking about the whole aspects of consequences and the example you just gave with regard to smart cities, aren't you essentially just looking at a criticality analysis?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. I call it consequence analysis in IT. It's a criticality analysis in physical security. It's exactly the same. The only difference is we're putting, in the consequence analysis, we're absolutely putting a financial number to all that. Because they have to make a financial decision. And so the ultimate metric for that decision is going to be a financial decision.
Criticality is really just a piece of getting to the consequence analysis, really.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a piece of consequence.
Right, so bridging the discussions.
Priorities are-
Yeah, so you have to bridge the discussions with the criticality of what we're talking about into really the governance and operational aspects. Once you've done that, you're bringing in other stakeholders that actually gets us the budget. If you just do the criticality assessment, you're typically stuck, the barrier's already there. So you have to go beyond, and that's what we're talking about. You have to go beyond that. You know it.
What a great discussion.